Hello students, this is your next online lecture of Development Economics. Previously we have finished our chapter on population growth and development. Today we are going to start the next chapter of the human capital, that is education and health in economic development. This is your chapter number 8 of the Tudaro and Smith, and this is a news for all of the students that we are going to conduct for your quizzes and assignments. Will take your quizzes and assignments as in your midterm exams, and the course will be about the online lectures, and before the midterm exam course is also included. You can ask the question about this on the Google Classroom platform. Very soon, I will upload another lecture that will be about the MCQs and assignments, how you take that assignments and quizzes, and how the students will give me the assignments and quizzes. So we will talk about this. Before that, you can ask any question regarding this, because this new policy uh, from the university, and for this you have to prepare all the online lectures and the course that we have completed before the midterm exam, as the midterm exams are not conducted. But midterm exam, if it were conducted, that was about 25%, but now we have to cover 65 to 75 percent through the MCQs and through the quizzes and through the assignments. So obviously more course will be included, and very soon I will tell you about how we will conduct those quizzes and assignments. Today we are going to start our next chapter, that is about human capital. And human capital is related with education and health, as you know that both are very important for economic development, because both contribute for economic growth and development. These are positively related with the economic development. According to a World Bank president in 2013, he said that to end poverty and boost shared prosperity, countries need robust, inclusive economic growth. And to drive growth, they need to build human capital through investments in health, education, and social protection for all their citizens. It does mean that, first of all, there is the dire need for increasing the economic growth is to reduce the poverty, and then there is dire need, or this is very important, to build the human capital through investments in health, education, and social protection. And according to Minister of India, Manmohan Singh, in 2005, he said, the slow improvement in the health status of our people has been a matter of great concern. There is no denying the fact that we have not paid adequate attention to this dimension of development thus far. Most of the nations, they are not getting attention to the health and education, as this is very important concern for the economic development. There is another Nobel laureate in economics who said that my work on human capital began with an effort to calculate both private and social rates of return to men, women, blacks, and other groups from investments in different levels of education. And from all the sayings, it is showing that education is foremost important for each and every nation for their economic development. So, here the central roles of education and development. Education and health are basic objectives of the development. So, here we're talking about education and health. This is concerned or this is called as the human capital. One is called physical capital and second is called human capital. In physical capital, we mostly talk about machinery, assets, etc. And here we are talking about human capital, human skills, health, education. So, health and education are basic objectives of development. They are important ends in themselves. Health is central to well being, and education is essential for a satisfying and rewarding life. Both are fundamental to the broader notion of expanded human capabilities. At the same time, education plays a key role in the ability of the developing country to absorb modern technology and to develop the capacity for self sustaining growth and development. Moreover, health is prerequisite for increase in productivity and successful education relies on adequate health as well. So this is showing that health and education both are playing a key role for economic development and both are interrelated with each other. If the people is or if the person is healthy, it means he or she is getting the good education facilities. Thus both health and education can also be a vital component of growth and development as inputs to the aggregate production function. It means their dual role as both inputs and outputs give health and education their central importance in economic development. So, both are considered the important objectives of development, and these are considered the important components. And we are talking about these have the dual roles as inputs and outputs that gives health and education their central importance in economic development. It is hard to overstate how truly dramatic the improvements in world health and education have been. If you see in 1950, some 280 of every 1,000 children in the developing world as a whole died before the fifth birthday. By 2011, that number had fallen to 95 per thousand in low income nations and 46 per thousand in middle income nations. Though now compared with 6 per thousand in high income countries and just 4 in many European countries. Some important killers have been completely or nearly eradicated or finished, like the smallpox used to kill more than 5 million people every year. The virus no longer exists outside a few laboratory samples. Major childhood illness such as polio have been largely controlled through the use of vaccines. In addition, recent decades have witnessed a historically extension of literacy and other basic education to a majority of the people in the developing world. So it means in all the nations, the health and education are playing the key role for economic development. But if we only see the situation of health of the different nations, like low income nations or high income nations or European nations, so we have seen that high income nations have the less ratio of the child mortality rate. And whenever we see about the developing nations, they have the high rate. And if you see about the literacy or education level, so that is almost very low in developing nations. And the United Nations reports that although there were still 775 million illiterate people aged 15 or older in the world in 2010. And good news is that 82% of all people are literate today compared to just 63% as recently in 1970, but almost two-thirds of the world's illiterate people are women. First of all, what is literacy? This is the ability to read and write. This is called the literacy. And we are talking about the human capital. This is about productive investments embodied in human persons, including skills, abilities, ideas, health, and locations, often resulting from expenditures on education, on the job training program, and medical care. These all related with human capital. This is not only about the skillful workers, but also about your spending on education, on the job training program, and medical care. This is also included in human capital. Despite such outstanding achievements, developing nations continue to face greater challenges as they seek to continue to improve the health and education of their people. As you can see, the condition of Pakistan, very soon I will tell you about what is the recent condition of the health and education in Pakistan, and you can also compare easily with your Asian nations also and with the high income nations also. And the distribution of health and education within countries is an important as income distribution. Life expectancy may be quite high for better off people in developing countries, but far lower for the poor. Child mortality rates in developing countries remain more than 10 times higher than that the ratio has been or the rate has been found in rich countries. These deaths generally result from conditions that are easily treatable, including millions who continue to die needlessly each year from dehydration caused by diarrhea. So it means whenever you see the condition of health in developing nations, it means we have the poor health facilities. That's why so many children are died under the age 5. So that's why the child mortality rate or the child death rates in developing countries, that is about going to high. But if the death rate in developing countries fell to those prevailing in the developed countries, the lives of nearly 7 million children would be saved each year. Many children who survive nonetheless suffer chronic problem of malnutrition or the parasitic infection and other recurrent illness. Problem caused by lack of key micronutrients such as iodine as well as protein affect up 2 billion people, but children are particularly vulnerable. So it means We are facing the severe issue of health in developing nations. You can go through here.
A 2014 report by UNESCO found that more than 780 million adults around the world could neither read nor write. That's 1 out of every 10 people, with more than half of that figure comprised by women. Although literacy has always been vital within most societies, the modern focus on technology over manual labor has left few options available to those who've never learned to read or write. So, what are the world's most illiterate countries? Well, first of all, it's important to note that not all illiteracy is the same. Some people are unable to read or write at all in any language. Others are able to construct and read simple sentences, but are unable to deal with everyday literacy beyond a basic, limited vocabulary. This is known as functional illiteracy and is considerably more prevalent. In the US alone, 30 million adults are functionally illiterate, meaning they cannot read above the level of a 10-year-old. Another 60 million have below average literacy rates and are unable to understand a basic newspaper. And there are severe correlations between illiteracy and success. The Department of Justice notes that the link between academic failure and delinquency, violence, and crime is welded to reading failure. Nearly 3/4 of U.S. prisoners are functionally illiterate. But around the world, true illiteracy is an endemic problem. 75% of illiterate adults can be found in just 10 countries. However, within those large countries, illiterates make up a smaller percentage than in countries with more severe generational poverty. In at least a dozen countries, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa, more than half of the population is truly illiterate. South Sudan is currently the most illiterate country in the world, with barely 1 in 4 people able to read at all. In fact, nearly 3/4 of South Sudanese children have never even stepped foot in a classroom. Of those that do attend primary school, fewer than 10% finish. Literacy is vital to a country's success, primarily because of its effect on human capital, or how much economic output a person can achieve. Those who are illiterate are severely disadvantaged. Illiterate people are much harder to train for jobs, and they have more difficulty finding healthcare options and social services. On the other hand, nations with high literacy rates have been found to directly correlate with modernization, development, and economic growth. But for many, illiteracy is a self-perpetuating cycle. In impoverished countries, residents must focus the majority of their attention on survival and how to feed, shelter, and clothe themselves and their families. Although education is a vital tool, few have the available resources, ability, or time to learn how to read and write. Countries with low literacy rates, like Somalia or Afghanistan, are often underdeveloped with extremely high maternal mortality rates. And across the board, women are further disenfranchised, with 2/3 of illiterate adults around the world comprised of women. Although literacy rates are rising overall, in part thanks to initiatives like UNESCO's Literacy Initiative for Empowerment, education is still scarce in areas like South and West Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Oftentimes, education is seen as a threat to totalitarian governments, leading to brain drain, executions of intellectuals, and book burnings. Check out this Seeker Daily video to learn about the Nazis' book burning raids.
The book burning ceremonies took place on May 10, 1933, and it was students who took the lead in organising the mass event. Just a month earlier, the German Student Union, which was heavily influenced by Nazis at the time, had announced a campaign against the un-German spirit, a month-long propaganda effort that would culminate in what was referred to as a cleansing of literary works.
Thanks for watching TestTube. Make sure to like and subscribe. We put out new videos every day.
What is human capital? Human capital is the knowledge, skills, and personality attributes that humans have that contribute to the creation of goods and services. Our creativity and habits are also part of human capital. Human capital refers to the production factors coming from human beings that we use to create products and services. In other words, human capital is the collection of all our resources. It compromises all our knowledge, abilities, talents, skills, intelligence, training, judgment, and experience. Human capital also includes our wisdom, individually and collectively. Quite simply, it refers to qualities that human beings have or learn that make them more productive. In a national economy, human capital refers to how its population contributes towards wealth creation. Human capital, alongside structural capital and relational capital, make up knowledge capital. In today's economy, which is shifting towards a knowledge economy, the importance of human capital is growing rapidly. Human capital also refers to the value of a person for a company, specifically their value regarding being productive during the time span of their career. Let's suppose Mary Smith began her 45-year career with a starting salary of $40,000. We'd expect her salary to increase annually by 3%. Therefore, using an 8% rate for the time value of money, her human capital at the beginning of her career would be just over $705,000. The human capital value of most college graduates exceeds $1 million. Thank you for watching this Markets Business News video on human capital. What
So, health and education are playing a very important role for economic development. And in this chapter, we examine the roles of education and health in economic development. These two human capital issues are treated together because of their close relationships. That's why they are or they have the dual impacts of the effects of health spending on the effectiveness of educational system and vice versa. And when we speak of investing in person's health and investing in a person's education, we are after all talking about the same person. We then consider the relationship between income on the one hand and health and education on the other. So, despite their close relationship, you will see that higher household income is no guarantee of improved health and education because you don't know on what direction they are spending their income. Human capital must be given to the right attention in its own right, even in economies that are growing rapidly. So it means if the people have higher income, it doesn't mean they have the good education and health because we don't know whether they're spending on health and education. Likewise, this is the condition for economies also. If you see the health and education condition of the Pakistan or any developing nation, so whether they are spending their income on the right direction, if they are spending their income on the health and education, so it means their economic development may be grow. So health and education may be distributed very unequally, just as income and wealth are. We know that in developing nations, we see that there are very unequal income distribution. So very dramatic improvements in world health and education over past half century. You can see here that um, whenever you see 1950 child mortality was 280 per thousand births in developing world. Okay, it was very high, and in 2002 it remains 120, and then it went to 37 in middle income nations. Major childhood illness largely controlled, and we have discussed about that significant improvement in literacy rates and basic education to majority of people in developing countries. But despite these achievements, whenever you see the condition of health and education, we are far below than the other rich or you can see the developed countries. As we are discussing here, both education and health are considered the joint investments for the developments. So, but improved health and education help families escape some of the vicious circle of poverty in which they are trapped. Finally, we take a close look at educational and health system in developing nations to identify the sources of the severe inequalities and inefficiencies that continue to plague them. And the evidence reveals that investments in human capital have to be undertaken with both equity and efficiency for them to have their potential positive effects on income. We're seeing here the education and health are considered as the joint investment for the development, and these are investment in the same individual. So greater health capital may improve the returns to investment in education. So how these are related? It means health is the basic factor in school attendance or any university level attendance. If the person is healthy, it means he is more vigilant. He will take more, or he will concentrate more on education, and healthier students learn more effectively. Longer life raises the rate of return to education, and healthier people have lower depreciation of education capital. And the greater education capital may improve the returns to investment in health. It means both are interrelated. Greater health have the investment in education, and greater education have the investment in health. So the public health programs need knowledge learned in school. Basic hygiene and sanitation may be taught in school. Education needed in training of the health personnel. So it means both health and education both are related. Improvement in productive efficiency from an investment in education raises the return on life-saving investment in health. Whenever we talk about improving the health and education, so we have one question in mind that why increasing investment is not sufficient. It means the people have income but not they are having the health, good health and education. If that is so, it means the health and education much higher in high income nations. So causality might runs in both directions. With higher incomes, people and government can afford to spend more on education and health. First of all, this is the um, basic question. And with greater health and education, higher productivity and income are possible. So, development policy needs to focus on all three questions simultaneously. The past half century or so have witnessed advances in human capital, health, and education levels improved in both developed and developing nations, but by most measures, they have improved more rapidly in developing nations. As a result, there has been some international convergence in these measures. Only whenever you talk about sub Saharan Africa, where life expectancy fell due to aid crisis, AIDS has some doubt been cast on the trend toward catching up in health. Primary enrollments rise in developing nations, education is catching up. Though some observers believe that the quality gap may be larger than ever. Even though the health and education gap between developed and developing countries may remain large, and further improvements may prove difficult. The progress to date has been unmistakable. So, better health status and nutrition affects the school performance, and to improve effectiveness of schooling, improve health of children in developing nations. Whenever you see in any case, both are correlated with each other. So there are the linkages which are showing the box in of the eighth chapter, box number 2. They are showing the linkage between investment in health and education. So improving health and nutrition, health and education, we are talking about why increasing income is not sufficient. Health and education level are much higher in high income nations. There are good reasons to believe that causality runs in both directions. We have discussed about that the causality runs in both directions, that in the developed nations we talk about. With higher income, people and government can afford to spend more on education and health. With greater health and education, higher productivity and income as possible means both we have the bidirectional causality, that whenever there is high income, people or government, they more spend on education and health, and if the people are more healthy and educated, they will show more productivity and they will earn more income. So better health status and nutrition, they affect the school performance. If any student is healthy, they will be more vigilant in their attendance. They will be more concentrated on their education also. So, moreover, calories are not the same as nutrition, and the nutrition of earners is not the same as the nutrition of the children. But there is considerable evidence that the better the education of the mother, the better the health of her children. So, earlier and longer school enrollment, better school attendance, more effective learning. And to improve effectiveness of schooling, improve health of children in developing nations. And health status once attained also affects school performance, as has been shown in studies of many developing nations. Better health and nutrition lead to earlier and longer school enrollment. Finally, there is spillover benefits to the investments in one's health or education. An educated person provides benefit to people around him or her, such as reading for them or coming up with innovations that benefit the community. And this is concluded by WHO, that is World Health Organization report. Ultimate responsibility for the performance of a country's health system lies with government. As you remember that in second chapter we have discussed the Human Development Index, and in that index we have discussed that health, education, and income that are foremost important. If you see that whether the country is lying in the low income nation or the high income nation, you can see the Human Development Index (HDI). And in case of Pakistan, we have seen that there is a bad condition of health and education because the literacy rate in Pakistan is much lower than other nations also. Even if you compare with India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, that our literacy rate is very low and we are spending much less, less than 2% on health and about 2.5% on education. So this is very important to invest in education and health. The analysis of investment in health and education is unified in the human capital approach. Human capital is the term economists often use for education, health, and human capacities that can raise productivity when increased. So, here we are talking about an analogy is made to conventional investments in physical capital. After an initial investment is made, a stream of higher future income can be generated from both expansion of education and improvements in health. And private returns to education are high and may be higher than social returns, especially and higher educational levels. Whenever we will invest more on education, we will take the more benefit from that. For example, education increases empowerment and autonomy in major matters in life, such as capacity for civic engagement, making decisions concerning one's own health care, and freedom of choose one's own spouse over an arranged marriage. But the basic human capital approach focuses on the indirect ability to increase well being by increasing income. So, the impact of human capital investments in developing nations can be quite substantial. So, here is the look about the human capital theory.
Human capital theory has become a major theoretical construct for understanding a country or community's profound socio-economic changes and for strategizing how to spur creation of wealth. Basically, human capital theory is the totality of investments made in humans so that those humans are better at producing other things. Those investments might include education, skills, talents, and experiences that make the individual more productive and more skilled. Ultimately, higher worker productivity then leads to higher individual value and more lucrative labor markets. Classical human capital theory assumes that education is a form of human capital, meaning that those who invest in their education are strategically calculating to increase their capital, which will in turn lead to higher income. Horace Mann is referred to as the father of human capital theory and developed the theory that the economic value of people is based on their educational achievements, skills, and knowledge. He believed that investing in one's education would improve the quality of workers and therefore increase the wealth of the community. Horace Mann contended that schooling would ultimately end poverty. Theodore Schultz was the first person to coin the phrase human capital in his address to the American Economic Association in 1960. He believed that people and nations should invest in education to improve job opportunities and economic growth. A third important theorist to the human capital theory was Daniel Bell, who in 1973 coined the term post-industrial. This explained the economy that no longer depends on heavy industry. He predicted a shift from blue-collar workers to white-collar labor and recognized the change to the type of work needed nationally. He identified that the work of the future would require more highly educated and academic workforces. Ultimately, human capital is everything inside of a worker's head. A person's stock of basic intelligence, experiences both in and out of the workplace, education, work habits, trainings received, social and personality attributes, energy level, judgment, trustworthiness, initiative, and creativity embody the ability to perform labor so as to produce economic value. These resources are the total capacity of the people that represent a form of wealth which can be directed to accomplish the goals of the nation or state or a portion thereof. Human resource, or a country's naturally endowed labor force based on birth rate, can be transformed into human capital with effective inputs of education, health, and moral values. An example of how companies can raise employee human capital, including motivation and job satisfaction, might include recognition programs, staff involvement initiatives, and monetary incentives. In many ways, companies focus on social responsibility to their employees by establishing incentive programs such as salary bonuses, variable pay initiatives, corporate pep talks, team building exercises and retreats, wellness programs, and other types of policies. By instilling the feeling of positive job satisfaction within workers, management can build confidence, loyalty, and ultimately improve the output performance of the employee. By actively pursuing initiatives to cater to the employee's well-being, for example by engaging with staff to help create work and home life balance, a company can open up an effective communication for change. This helps motivate employees by creating a workplace environment where their voice can be heard while having their employers ensure all staff maintain healthy and happy lives. This proactive approach of involvement can raise awareness to unforeseen issues and find effective methods to help motivate employees and increase overall job satisfaction and productivity. The basis of human capital development is a theoretical pipeline that consists of three main dimensions: preparation, recruitment, and retention. These three dimensions make up the foundation of a company's strategic human capital plan. In fulfilling these three dimensions of development, companies will be able to produce a staff that is talented and effective as both workers and leaders. The first principle of the pipeline, preparation, focuses on strengthening human capital of an individual by fostering work-related skills or knowledge. These types of trainings and professional development opportunities are tailored specifically to fit the needs of either certain organizations or branches or of individuals wanting to qualify in specific areas. The second principle of this pipeline, recruitment, addresses procurement of individual assets and is directed at more general characteristics of future employees, such as self-efficacy, problem-solving skills, and other broader abilities. Of course, you want to make sure that your future employees are adequately licensed and have adequate training for their positions. The third principle or dimension of this pipeline, retention, explores human capital and the promotion of individual self-exploration, exploring one's traits, abilities, interests, and skills by providing them the opportunity for further education or educational experiences. Organizational culture, or the specific way a business does business, is based on shared subconscious assumptions and implied beliefs that affect daily behavior and organizational performance. This is also known as, quote, the way we do things around here, a quote made famous by Charles Handy, the Irish author and philosopher who specialized in organizational behavior and management. Research has shown that organizational culture has a powerful impact on performance and long-term effectiveness of the organization, specifically on employee morale, retention, commitment, productivity, and innovation. Examples of companies with strong organizational cultures include Google, Apple, and Walmart. Edgar Schein, a former professor at MIT Sloan School of Management, established that there are 4 layers of organizational culture, including values, beliefs, behaviors, and paradigm. Schein contended that organizations should create a culture that embodies how you want your organization to run, such as daily behavior and organizational performance. Examples might include effective communication, collaboration, customer service, and employee value. Many organizations might choose to change or build their organization's culture based on leadership styles, visions, values, and missions, ethics, innovation, tech changes, and other changes important to the innovation of the company. It is important to note that when an organization chooses to change their atmosphere, that special attention should be made to creating a culture of friendliness, camaraderie, and an environment that fosters loyalty and happiness to ensure employee job satisfaction and maintain high human capital.
So we have discussed about the relationship between human capital means education and health. We'll meet in the next lecture. Then we'll discuss about the Pakistan data, how much Pakistan is lagging behind other nations from their health and education. So thanks for your attention.